Hello and welcome to another episode of Heal Yourself with me, Sarah Dawkins. We're the podcast that shares real people sharing their own healing to help you to see that we can heal ourselves, even sometimes when doctors say we can't. And today, my guest is Dr. Heather Browne. And as a relationship expert and best-selling author, Dr. Heather Browne has worked with thousands of individuals and couples in psychotherapy. Her recently released book, Speaking with the Heart, is the message she shares in her TEDx and keynote speeches. Dr. Heather has been published in hundreds of journals and been featured on many mainstream news channels and top magazines. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Heather Browne.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here, Sarah.
Oh, I'm so thrilled that you could come and share your journey. So could you please share with the listeners what you've been through and how you've healed?
Sure. Like so many of us, we're not really raised to think about death as a natural part of life, but it absolutely is. And mine started in a significant way at a young age. My mom was a paranoid schizophrenic, and she struggled with that my whole childhood, I'm sure most of her life. And she killed herself when I was 16, which of course was shocking and horrific and confusing. And my dad had a very hard time with knowing how to navigate life after that had happened. I was born in the 60s, so mental health wasn't something that was talked about. So dealing with the fact that his wife had killed herself was really hard on him as well. And he needed to kind of control me and have me turn out okay. And when I wanted to explore theater and arts and things to help myself get my emotions and feelings out, he just couldn't handle it. And so his viewpoint was, I won't support you unless you go are a businesswoman and you're smart. So I was basically disowned after my mom killed herself, but I knew I had to figure out how to deal with my feelings. And I'm sure a lot of listeners have been raised with someone who has an addiction or a physical illness or a mental illness or an emotional illness. And so much of life is then focused upon that person, that everybody else is struggling and suffering. So I went off and did theater, and then did life, got my doctorate, became a psychotherapist, largely because of losing my mom, and then married, kids, and then I lost my husband. Lost him almost 10 years ago. And I remember one of my friends saying, well, if this had to happen to anybody, thank God it happened to you. And I looked at her and I said, what? And she said, well, you're so strong, which anybody who loses anybody hates hearing. And I said, okay. And she said, well, you've already lived with your mom, so you know how to help your kids get through it. And you've already dealt with it, so you'll be able to get through it. And I remember looking at her and thinking, but why my kids? Like, why do my kids have to go through this too? And I think that's such an imperative question, because when we go through grief, what do we ask? Why? Why me? Why them? Why this? Why can't it be different? And no matter how often we scream that, cry that, plead that, beg that, there's no good answer. It just is. And it's horrible. And it's terrible. And I think there's a place of an incredible amount of shame and blame that is placed with death upon ourselves, upon others, upon God, upon the situation, maybe upon doctors. And there's a place for us to really walk through that and explore that, because that's very destructive in lots and lots of ways. And I think if we were to talk about death being as natural as life, that there's no guarantee that you're going to have as long as you have until you have no more, we wouldn't have this really bizarre response to death. It is completely natural. It will happen to every single person. And yet somehow along the line, we think we get to decide when. We get to decide how. And we simply don't. And so learning how to embrace that aspect for me has been very important for my clients to bring them back into the place of really being present in what their life is. We do this really strange thing as humans, or maybe it's just the way we are created, but we plan a life out, and everything beyond now is dream and hope and wish and planning. But because there's no guarantee beyond this moment, when something changes, we feel like we're robbed or gypped. Our life isn't what our life was to be. It actually is exactly what it is to be. It's just that we have dreamt other. And that is hard to deal with. And then, of course, the place of if someone's been in your life your entire life, like a parent, a partner, after a while, it feels like they've been in your life your whole life. Then how do you do life on your own? And that is a very strange experience when you have always felt connected to someone else. You then feel very different when they're gone. And who are you with them not here? Happens particularly for mothers and fathers when they lose a child. Who are they now that they're no longer a parent to a physical child? And so there's lots of places for us to explore. And how do we take care of ourselves, and how do we walk through these different aspects of our life to honor ourselves and to do the best that we can to honor the situation that is laid upon our lap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when I worked in America, actually, it as a nurse, it seemed that the emphasis on life wasn't so much about the quality, it was about the quantity.
Yeah.
And people asked, don't let my parent die before, well, one lady said 104, her mum was 99. Don't, like, as if other people or doctors or medicine can prevent death. And as you say, it comes to all of us, and it's a conversation that I think more so in the West that we don't tend to have. Whereas I think in the East, but even here in Spain, death is celebrated as life. It's so radically different to how it is in the UK. I'm not sure about America, but we really grieve and mourn. Whereas here in Spain, they celebrate. Well, they had a great life. They lived to be 80, however, 90, however, and celebrate that. And it's totally about perspective, isn't it? And cultural perspective as well.
I completely agree. And the UK and US are probably very similar. Mexico with the Day of the Dead is very different. I think a lot of it depends upon how you look at afterlife. That changes quite a bit, and how you look at spirit. But I remember when I used to write a poem on the anniversary of my mom's death, and I wrote a beautiful one at 38 years. It's published. It's gorgeous. 38 years of days. And then I wanted to write one on the 40th, and I was saying things like, have I cried as many tears as there were in the raging rain of the flood? And have I pounded my chest as much as the march along the desert? And God and I have a really amazing relationship. He's very cheeky with me, which I actually love. And he slapped me on the side of my head and he said, seriously? Seriously? 38. Is this what you're going to do at 40? And is this what you're going to do at 45 and 50 and 60 and 70 and 80 years? And I sat there embarrassed and said, yeah. And he said, oh, Heather, she's been gone for 40 years. Like, I know that, God. And he said, you had her for 16. Why don't you celebrate those 16? And my heart just opened to this beautiful place of, oh my gosh, I'm celebrating her death, but not even in a glorious way, in this like self-inflictive, painful, beating way of poor me and martyr and self-pity and all of that. And I let myself fall super deep into that. And I wasn't really honoring and loving my mom. And speaking of all the I was speaking of all the beauty, but I was really getting caught on like, she shouldn't have died, and why did this happen, and all that gobbledygook. And when God said that, I thought, right, because I'm not getting her back. So I'm grieving for 40 years instead of grieving and celebrating. And then that shifted it. And from there on out, I have never, on Facebook posted, my mom died 40 years ago. I don't. I don't even put that on for my husband. I don't celebrate the death in celebrating the pain. I celebrate the life and try to help myself connect with the love. This is something that happened in a session with someone. She was grieving the loss of her mom, and she was deep, deep, deep in the ache. But she was at that place where it was starting to be not helpful. And I think we kind of all know when we get there in grief. For a while, you're just in it and you need to be in it. You need to be processing it. And then you start to feel yourself looking at more photos or staying a little bit longer in that place. And she was for sure there. And we were talking, and I said to her, you have to feel this painful loss. You have to feel this painful loss. Because when you allow yourself to then say, okay, I am open, now the spirit, the energetic, the holy, the sacred, the beyond, which is connected with God and universe and all of that, can come through in a different way. But if you don't recognize the pain and the loss, there is no place for it to come in. And she just kind of went, wait, what? I said, you've got to feel the absence, because there is a physical absence, 100%. But you've got to feel the physical absence and then realize, but there could be something beyond, to then feel the new energetic presence. And that is a key to healing. That is just a key. When you can really be at the place, and it takes us all a different amount of time. Look like it took me 40 years. Sometimes it's quick for people. But when you can take that place and say, I am ready to experience you differently because they're of unconditional love, you will. And people say all the time, there's signs, birds, flowers, pennies, music, light. I felt energy presence in my hand the day after my husband died. I just felt like his hand was above mine. I could feel it. So people will say a touch on the shoulder, a whisper in the ear, dreams, coming back in meditation. There's so many beautiful ways. And you'll be looking and there'll be 5 birds in the sky and you get caught on one and you're like, what is it about that bird? When you feel a nudgingness. They say birds are beautiful carriers of spirit because they're free and they fly and they're doing what they are to do, which is just to bring and share. So a lot of people feel it. A lot of people feel it with birds. But you need to be in that place where you're open to receiving them in a different way. Some people never are. And that's okay. Grief is your personal journey for you to walk through in the way that you feel you are to. And it's very important to hold that sacred. This is the way I need to grieve for me. This was my partner, my mother, my child, my dog, and everyone's relationship with every single person or animal is different. And we have a lot of grief too. That's not even about people and animals. It could be a limb. It could be a dream. It could be a career. It could be a home. It could be you have to move out of the country and you lose your country. There's so many things beyond a person that we grieve. Aging. There can be a lot of grief in aging. So there's a lot to, can I open myself up for what there is now, which I will experience differently than a physical presence. And for some people, that's a little too woo-woo. And if it is, let it go. But if it's not, it can be a beautiful place of connection.
Yeah. And some of the clients that I've spoken to have said they feel guilty when they start getting back into life, stepping outside of their personal grieving in their home and starting to try and make a life for themselves by themselves. And they feel a tremendous amount of guilt for feeling joy and happiness about their life, because on the one hand, they've lost a partner or a loved one. And then on the other hand, they know they have to make a life, but are feeling guilty because they're stepping outside of that sorrowful, grieving, mourning feeling that they were doing in the house. And that again is a whole part of the grieving process, isn't it?
Yeah, and I remember telling my children, your father didn't die to destroy your life. He did not.
Yeah.
He did not die for your life to end at 14 and 17. He died because for some reason, who we are to be now, it wouldn't have happened in the same way if he was here. And on some level, he had to have felt we could live without him, or he would still be here. I remember, and it is a huge part, Sarah. It's a huge part. I remember the first time I kissed someone, and it was years after Ted died, but I remember and having that thought, like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I can have a kiss. I've been alone for so many years. But I had somebody who said something to me which was really lovely. It was lovely. It was a man I dated a couple of dates. And he said to me, if I ever get the opportunity to meet Ted, I'm going to thank him. I said, what? And he said, you are such an amazing woman. He must have been an amazing man with you for you to be so beautiful. And something in me shifted, which is how I heal. I'll just have a different, it's like my brain opens up to a different part of my heart, opens up to a little corridor I wasn't aware was there. And my brain opened up to a different part. And I said, that's right. That's right. Because I am all of who I was because of Ted being my husband. But I now can offer even more because of what I have been through. And truly, I can say 100%, I will be an even better partner now because of what I have learned and what I've experienced and how much more I treasure and how much more some of the things that you get caught up on. To me, it's just like, oh, let's just work this through. Because like I've got today where I can love you and I miss not being hugged and I miss not kissing. I miss not having somebody want to be in my life. And so the people who have passed over, they've passed over. They're no longer here. And you even if you were to say that you're not remembering them in the same way, if you're not in pain, they don't want you remembering their moment of death, because truthfully, what you're doing then is you're fixated on the loss of them. So this is so beautiful. Thank you, Spirit. This is so beautiful. So when we let ourselves stay caught for a really long time in that, I shouldn't have joy, you are not focusing on their life. You are focusing on the fact that they're absent. That doesn't honor them at all. It doesn't honor them at all. What honors them is to say, oh, you were glorious. You were amazing. You taught me so much. And let me now share this with others. Let me show it like God with my mom. Let me share the beauty of my mom. Not I've had to live 40 years without her and how awful this is for me. That is celebrating the lack of. And that doesn't do any good to anyone. To anyone. So yeah, I think it's important that we grieve, of course, and you will continue to your whole life. But your life isn't to end when somebody else's ended, or you wouldn't be here too. And life isn't to be about being tortured. Life is about being able as much as possible to embrace and celebrate and love and grow and heal and help and support. I remember calling out to my husband died of a heart attack, and my son and I found him. And I remember calling out to God and saying, since you have chosen this horrific reality for my family, like you've got to get us through. And in whatever way, when we're able, please help the three of us use this to glorify and bless other people at a horrible time. And then, as Spirit has it, tons of widows and widowers come to me. Tons. And it wasn't that case before. And I haven't changed anything with my marketing, but it's just known. People will call and say, do you have any experience with grief? And now I'm known as a grief expert. But there is that place of how do I use what I've gone through to help support others? But staying in a place of my life is ruined because you died, that's not the point of life. at all. And that doesn't honor anyone. That just makes you a martyr. My belief is when I am glorious and amazing and do incredible things and I'm full of joy, that taps me back into my experience with them. When I'm in nature and I want to go hug a tree because my mom hugged trees, I am connecting with my mom. When I go to the ocean and I feel the wind on my face because I did that as a child, I'm remembering my mom and my dad in beautiful moments. If I stay
Yeah.
at home crying and sobbing that they're gone, I'm not doing anyone any good. I'm not honoring their life. I'm glorifying their death. And for them, it was gone in a second. And then they moved on to whatever there is for us beyond. So, but I remember that feeling like, oh, if I kiss somebody, is Ted going to be mad at me? And I thought, Heather, stop, stop. So if you find yourself in that place, and please know, I think we all do for a period of time, just
Yeah.
ask yourself, would that person, would that pet have wanted me to suffer for the rest of my life with them being gone? And the answer is going to be no. They're going to want you to love. It doesn't hurt them that you're in joy. They're in bliss. Then you're actually joining them in that moment. And they can say, oh, look, I wasn't able to give you that, but look what you have now. Oh, I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. Or whatever their experience is. I don't know. But I like to think that they're delighted in those moments. I know they come to us when we're in pain and want to bless us and help us. But I imagine the moments where they light up the most is where we're remembering them in absolute love and joy. I think of it kind of like a dream that when I think of them, let's say my mom, when I think of my mom, she wakes up for a moment. And so if I'm thinking of her in pain and suffering, I don't know if she feels that or not, probably not, but she's awoken to that. That's my memory of her, pain and suffering, struggle, sadness, all the disturbance. And it's part of our truth. But when I can wake up and think, oh, that day making gingerbread houses, I'm sure she's delighted. I remember that. The bike on Christmas, the guitar, the little turrets on the sandcastles. I'm sure she's delighted because that was the essence of my mom. So ask yourself, what am I holding on to? The essence of this person, the essence of this pet? Or am I holding on to the anger, the hatred, the struggle, the suffering, the destruction of my life? And you'll probably wrestle a little bit with both. And so be really gentle with yourself because it's a confusing journey.
Yeah, and I think the sadness and the suffering that we feel, it's about our loss of the physical, isn't it? Because that person is no longer with us physically. So we're actually grieving for ourselves because it makes us sad that they're no longer with us in the physical. And I read recently, not to associate somebody's passing over as a loss, because the only loss is physical. They're still with us energetically, supporting us, watching over us. So it is, as you say, about celebrating their life and those memories, but knowing for those who believe in spirit, obviously, that they're always with us and around us, and that they can be in multiple places at once, and they're just watching over us all the time. And we can tap into that. And as you say, those happy memories are a great way to do that, because it must bring them so much joy when they see us sitting, smiling, having those wonderful memories.
I think so. And if that feels just a little too airy-fairy for you, then let's go with a very practical truth, because practical helps us in these moments too. You have every moment and every memory. They were all given to you. You experienced all of them. The thing that you are missing is beyond. I had until 10:10 in the morning. I didn't get 10:11 or 12 or 13 or 14. But I had a message from God shortly after Ted died. And the message was, I have not so much as taken away. I have moved you. You're no longer there. You are here. Do you understand? And my response was, come on, God, you've totally taken away. And his response to me was, you're not ready to understand. I was like, ugh, but I got it. Ted was in my life for 25 years. Every day. We never broke up. So from the day I met him, Ted, 25 years. One day, one moment, he was taken away. I have not so much as taken away. 25 years, 1 minute. I have moved you. You're no longer there. You're here, and I'm with you. And so I went to that place of, yeah, I know, big deal. But then I got a different insight. Every human being has a promise of if they wake up, they are alive. That's it. That's the promise we get. If we wake up, we are alive and we're cognizant. Beyond that, what we have is not guaranteed. I might have a pet, I might have a job, I might have children, I might have a house, I might have money, I might have a sickness. Don't know. I wake up, I have this day, and then everything else is put upon my plate for me. My kids are still both on my plate. Thank you, God. Pets, some have come off. Clients, some have come off. Cars, some have come off. Health, some of it's come off. New things have been put on. So if we realize that I am given today and that's it, and it's up to me to decide what do I do with what comes my way, then there's a very different reality in the way you're living your life. I am given everything. Nothing is really mine. I get today, and then with that, I choose to make it. But we believe we control. We believe it's ours. I'm blessed to have a house, but I also know, like, I might not always, and I have to recognize that. Not everyone gets to keep their house for their whole life. Things happen. Sometimes you sell it. Sometimes there's challenges. So I get my life, and that to me is what we are to treasure. I hope on the day that I pass, I believe in God. So I hope on the day that I pass that God will say, so how was it? And I'm going to say, oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was hard, but it was amazing. Thank you for letting me be Heather. Like, thank you for giving me this heart and this mind and this journey. And then I hear God saying, so did you do everything you wanted to do? And I'm going to have to say, oh, hell no, not even close. But I really enjoyed so much of what I did. And I'm really grateful that you gave me this extraordinary experience. And for me, I'm 60. I am so glad that God hasn't taken me yet, because I'm learning every day how to love myself more and others more and this journey more. And I wish I had gotten it at 18, but I didn't. I had a lot of figuring out from what my life had been, but I'm just so grateful that I've got people like you and listeners who are in this with me, like rallying for each other. Life is hard, but it's also extraordinary.
It's what we make it as well, isn't it? Because we've always got a choice. Sometimes it's between a rock and a hard place, but we always have a choice. And it's what we do with those choices. And if we can see opportunities opening up as well and just jump in. So it's about reframing our lives into what do we want it to be? How do we want it to go? And try and move forwards in the way that we want to. But I do believe, coming back to your sitting in it, because I lost my stepfather when I was only 18. You have to really sit in it and feel it to heal it.
Absolutely. And I think there's a place also in that whole to move away from the loss of them into the celebration and the glory of an experience that you have had and how they have changed you going forward. So many people in America do a celebration of life instead of a memorial. And I don't know when they started, maybe 20 years ago. And they can be quite beautiful. I've been to some that are just glorious, and they really celebrate the life of the person. And then the talks are about how that person was impacted by that person. And if you know them in a particular way, I remember being at my godmother's, and so I had a very close relationship with her. She stepped in as a pseudo mom when I asked her to. When I was 21, I realized I really needed a mom figure in my life, and fortunately she was willing to step in. And so I had a very unique relationship with her. And when I was hearing these other people talk about the impact she had, I got to see all these other sides of her that I didn't know. And so in talking about her passing, it actually made her fuller in some ways in my mind and in my heart. And I think there's a beautiful truth in that. I think it's part of the reason why coming together and grieving can be so powerful.
Yeah.
And we tend to naturally do it. I remember the day my husband died. I remember being at his brother's house, and everyone was talking about these moments that they loved, or these funny moments. And I remember listening to them, and I wasn't really laughing, but I remember feeling a little moment of lightness to remember all these beautiful times when his heart had touched so many people. And I think that's, to me, probably the key. Ask yourself, am I allowing my heart to be touched by the essence of who they really have been in my life? Or is my heart caught in aching that they're no longer here? And there's going to be both, but there's a place where the aching that they're not here starts to become a little bit less powerful when you can grasp the glory of who they have been in your life and how they have impacted you. My children, I've talked about my mom so much. She was so influential in my life. My children said to me at one point, I can't wait to give Grandma Virginia her first real hug, because they feel like they've hugged her their whole lives. And I just kind of went, "Ah." And I thought that's beautiful, because to them, her energy is alive, and they feel her and they experience her. And I think, God, I love that, because I would have loved my mom to have been here to be a part of their beautiful, extraordinary lives. And to them, she has been.
That's
So,
beautiful. That
yeah.
really is beautiful.
Mhm. So I think also that's an important point. Suffering, hurting, grieving reminds us of the beauty of life, and how much we treasure it, and how much we honor it, and how important that person or that thing or that experience was to us. And we don't want it over, but what it meant. And to me, that's what is important to hold on to. We'll always be grateful that I had my mom for 16 years. I'll always be grateful that I had Ted for almost 25. Be grateful I had my dog for 16. There's the place of thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what I did have. And thank you for how that has impacted me and changed me. And yeah, I'm going to have a hard time with not getting more. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Can you share one tip that will, I know you shared lots. Can you share one tip specifically that will help the listeners in their own journey?
To me, this is the most important, and I really needed to do it for my kids. Find out for yourself, and then if there's people that are a part of the journey with you, honor the fact that everyone needs to grieve in the way that they need to grieve. A lot of people will tell you how to do it. They'll tell you what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And it's really important you honor your truth. It might look very different than it does to others, and they might question you. Unfortunately, they might judge you. unfortunately. But it's important that you're really pure with what you need. People told me to date shortly after Ted passed. There was no way. And when everyone said to me, Heather, come on, it's been a year, I'm like, nope, I was not ready. And people could say, you're running away, you're not living your life. It didn't matter. I was not ready. And so honor that part inside of you. And even if it's taking a little while, there's something that you have not yet been able to shift through to move on. My husband was, I'm going to call it a collector. And so our house was just jam-packed full of stuff. And his mom asked me to not touch anything, leave everything for a year. And then she would come with me and go through every single paper a year later. And that was because she had lost people in her life. Things had been given away, thrown away. And she was really petrified that that might happen in our life. My kids and I could not do that because everywhere there were piles that reminded us of the mess of him, not the beauty of him. And so I told her, Mom, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry that I can't grieve in the way that you wish I could, but I have to honor the kids and I. And we need to remember their dad beautifully. So we need to not have the stuff everywhere. I'll pay for a storage unit. I'll put it all in the storage unit. You can go through it whenever you want, but I will be going through paper by paper now. And I know it hurt her, and I did not mean to, but I had to honor what was best for myself and my kids. And don't cheat yourself there because you won't heal in the same way unless you really honor the way you need to grieve. Some people need to be alone. Some people need to be surrounded by people. Some people need to get back to work. Just honor what it is that's really vital for you, and you will know.
And where can people find you, Heather?
So my website's the easiest, www.drheatherbrowne.com. And that guides you to my TEDx, my book, the news clippings that I've been in and the podcasts and the TV shows and things like that, my courses, my newsletter, pretty much the hub of Heather. And then also if listeners have questions, please reach out. I'm always honored to speak with listeners. And sometimes it ends up being a relationship that we work with. And sometimes it's just where I pass information that I have. Either is fine with me as long as I can be a blessing to others.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all you have to help others on their own healing journeys. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.